This is 42nd Street Pete, and this is a rather different and special installment of Grindhouse Purgatory. It's been a couple of years since we lost our friend Sid Haig at 80 years old, and Sid was probably one of the most beloved actors and human beings ever to attend a convention or step in front of a camera. Well, about 10 years or so ago, we were at this convention called Saturday Nightmares in, I believe it was East Rutherford, when Sid, myself, and Rob Housechild sat down for roughly 4 to 5 hours and did a complete career overview interview. The purpose of this interview was eventually to release the interview on DVD and for Sid to be able to use the interview to write his own biography. Well, as things progressed, I paid to have the DVD edited and all that other stuff. I sort of lost touch with Sid, and Sid sort of lost touch with me. We got back in touch, unfortunately, close to the period where he had passed away. So the project was never realized. What I did with the project, however, was I transcribed it to the best of my ability in the Something Weird special edition, the Sid Haig tribute issue. Now, I'm sitting with this DVD and thinking, probably a lot of other people were thinking too, what I could do with this thing. Did pay to have it edited, but in thinking about how Sid was, and how charitable Sid was, and how cool Sid was with his fans, Sid isn't around to share in any of the profits of this whole thing. So I thought that Sid would really appreciate it if I just gave it back to his fans, which is what I'm going to do right here. It's a long interview. It covers his complete career from soup to nuts. We sort of stay away from the Rob Zombie bullshit, because that was a crux of annoyance in probably every big interview we ever did, was that they always brought that up like he never did anything else. So this DVD, or this segment of Grindhouse Purgatory, is probably going to be in 3 parts, because like I said, this was a long interview, and for whatever reason, the person I paid to edit, which I won't mention, decided to take a bunch of key questions and use them as extras. So that's going to be probably part 3 of this whole thing. Now, I've spoken to Joe Ripple from Scares That Cares, and he has a charity going, Uncle Sid's Kids, which basically helps terminally ill children. That's what Scares That Cares does. Sid was very down with that charity. Hanging around with Sid, you start to realize what a great human being he is, and some of that rubs off on you. And what happened with me was I started what I called the 42P Food Project back during the pandemic, and basically raised $3,000 of selling my convention merchandise and whatever I had laying around here to buy food for the local food pantries, which were really hurting. So, be that as it may, like I said, I'm not going to make a dime doing this. I'm giving it back to Sid's fans as he would want me to do. But if you feel the inclination, please feel free to donate to either of those charities. You can reach Joe Ripple on Facebook, or Scares That Cares. You can Google that and find out how to get to him. As for me, my PayPal was Mr. 42nd Street MR 42, MR 42nd Street Pete spelled out at yahoo.com if you feel like you want to donate to the food project. If you want something for donating to the food project, let me know, and I can throw you some sleazy DVD or an issue of Screw or something that's laying around here. Unfortunately, I don't have too much, other merchandise left, but anyway, that's the story. It's something I felt that should be shared with Sid's fans, because Sid was just one of those great human beings, unlike some of these mercenary slugs that infest the conventions as of today. Sid never charged the fan for taking a picture with him, always kept his price reasonable, and always appreciated the fans that came up with him and stood there and bullshitted for no matter how long it took, because Sid always made the time for them. Sid was just a great charitable human being, and he always donated a percentage of his convention earnings to Habitat for Humanity and some other charities. So for Halloween, this is 42nd Street Pete giving you the ultimate Sid Haig interview on video. So, you know, if you like it, subscribe. If you like what we're doing, feel free to chip in. There's no obligation to do any of this stuff. It's just I wanted to give back something to a great human being who was a good friend of mine. So mask up, stay safe, and remember Sid as the person he was, the kind, gentle person, despite his, you know, characterizations on screen. Sid Haig was in a world of con men and assholes that infest the convention business and the movie business in general. Sid was the real deal. Sid was a genuinely caring human being, and we all miss him. So Sid, this one's for you. You all stay safe, mask up, enjoy the video, and if you want to subscribe, hit the like button, whatever. But from me to you, this is 42nd Street Pete saying Happy Halloween. And always remember that Sid was one of the coolest guys ever.
Some of your early work, I know you had done TV. I believe you said you had done a couple westerns too.
We can't do them all because I just did like my 67th film. Okay, so.
Oh, right, yeah.
And you've been doing it for 50 years because basically you're celebrating 50 years in film as we speak.
Yep, this is my 50th year, and I'm still going strong, and I don't plan to stop. July 14th this year, I'll be 72 years old, and I feel like I'm 25. So, I'm having fun.
So, what made you decide to be an actor?
I was an only child. Still am an only child, but I was an only child, and I had to kind of make up friends and make up situations for myself. It was kind of a make-believe world for me, because not only was I an only child, but I was the only kid in a 4-block square area, okay? So I had nobody to interact with, anybody to play around with, and I just started making stuff up. And so I didn't know it at the time, but I was acting, you know. And it was something that just kind of came natural to me. And when I was a kid, I was growing so fast that I couldn't even walk across the room without bumping into stuff, you know, because all the joints and everything weren't coming together fast enough. And so my parents signed me up for dance classes, and I took to it. I just loved it. I thought it was great. And so at the age of 7, I was getting paid to dance, sing and dance and having a good time, and everybody was just thinking I was cool, and so it was the greatest thing going. And I got involved in music, and the acting came afterward, and it was just something that evolved, and you know, it just took over my life. And here I am, 50 years later, still doing it.
Yeah, and you said about the music. You actually had a band, and you were a drummer for, I believe, the T-Birds, if I'm right.
I was playing in bands, and then a group of friends of mine and I started a rock and roll band, and we called ourselves, actually the first name of our band was called the Spades, okay? And we recorded for Dice Records. It was a tiny little label. And we were getting airplay all over the place. And Keen Records, which was Sam Cooke's label at the time, heard our A-side and bought our contract. And so we were then under contract to Keen Records and renamed the T-Birds. And it just took off from there. The problem with that whole thing was that we were working our asses off and not seeing any money. And I was practical even when I was a kid, okay? I said, you know what, this just is not working. So this whole music thing, I don't think so. And so I dropped it and was acting in college and whatnot. And then a friend of mine said, you know, you ought to go to the Pasadena Playhouse. And I didn't even know what that was. I said, what's that? You know, so I sent for brochure, and it looked pretty cool. And the alumni was, the roster of alumni was magnificent. You know, it was Gene Hackman and Dustin Hoffman and Charles Bronson, and goes on and on and on. And I went, yeah, okay, this is pretty cool. So I applied, I got my letters of recommendation, and went to school. And it was 2 years of actors boot camp, because I started my first class at 7:30 in the morning, and never forget, and we would never get out of there until 11:30 at night, and then you got to go home and do homework so that you could get up at 7:30 the next morning and do it all over again. So that was that. And it prepared you for working 16 and 18-hour days as an actor, as a professional actor. And so when that struck, I was set. I was used to it, you know. So it's the way it worked. Every 5 years we get a whole new group of fans for this film. It's an amazing thing.
And how did you prepare for the character Ralph that you played?
Well, Ralph is, the oldest child of the Mary family, and the Mary syndrome is that the older you get, the more you regress until you become animal-like. And so I was well into this process. I couldn't speak. I just kind of grunted and carried on like that, and I was very animalistic. So I figured the best way to prepare for this is just put those two things together, So I spent a lot of time at the zoo in front of the primate cages, just watching how they moved and how they interacted with one another. And then I would go to playgrounds and watch the kids playing and interacting with one another, and I kind of married those two things together and came up with the character. Jack Hill wanted me to come down and meet the producers, and he said, this character doesn't have any lines, but I just would like to have you do a few things and just kind of give them an idea of where you might go with this. Jack Hill called me in to meet the producers, and he was just going to give me something to do to kind of illustrate to them what he thought the character should be like. And so I went in, and he gave me some things to do, and I wound up picking my nose and playing with my toes and just basically drooling and being a complete idiot. And when I finished, the producers had this look of horror on their face, and it was like, oh my God, what did we just get ourselves involved in? Okay, because this guy is a total loony. But it all worked out, everything was fine. Working with Lon Chaney Jr. was an amazing thing for me, because I grew up watching all of his films, and now here I am on the set working with him. And the first couple of days I was just in awe, but he was such a great guy. He was very calming. At one point, because here again we were doing guerrilla films and short on crew and everything, and they were ready for Lon to do a scene, and Jack said, Sid, go get Chaney, because we're ready to do this. And so I knocked on his trailer door, and I said, Mr. Chaney, and he goes, hey, stop that. I'm Lon, you're Sid, we're working together. Let's cut out the Mr. business, okay? So, I mean, that's just the kind of guy he was. It's kind of a testimony to the crew, and basically the director of photography on this film, who was an amazing guy. He got tired of hauling around this big BNC camera, that weighed 45 pounds, and it was just, lugging this thing around was something else. So he made an aluminum camera. Al Taylor was his name, and the guy was fantastic. There was a scene with Mantan Moreland where he leans through the window of the house, and then we see him from the interior. Well, we had no power. So Al Taylor bounced light off of 6 reflectors, starting outside and up the steps and down the hall and through a room and then through another room onto him to get the scene lit. And there was not a hot spot on him at all, like you sometimes get with a reflector. When I met Mantan Moreland, who played the mail delivery guy, he was just so funny. He was, and I remembered him from all the Charlie Chan movies and all the other things that he was just so great in. And he was such a fun guy to be around. And, you know, he was so happy to be working because he was basically forgotten after the whole Charlie Chan business died. You know, he pretty much fell off the planet. So he was just so happy that people remembered him and wanted him to work in this film.
It just lasted on the Grindhouse and drive-in circuit for almost like 30 years.
Yeah.
And then got lost. It, you know, resurfaced on a bunch of, you know, public domain tapes, shall we say. And then I think finally there was a restored version put out, 30th anniversary, I believe, that...
The 30th anniversary of Spider Baby was pretty amazing because Johnny Legend was instrumental in getting some lost footage together and, you know, getting some things cleaned up with it and releasing it. First of all, it was on VHS, okay? We had a 30th anniversary at the New Art Theater in Hollywood. I showed up at the theater and there was this line of people around the block wanting to get in to see this thing, and I was freaked. I said, how do they even know about this? You know, I thought we were going to go down there and there'd be 50 people in the audience and that'd be that. But, I mean, there were people in their 40s, 50s, teenagers. It was amazing. And it's like every 5 years we get a whole new audience. People just they keep rediscovering this thing. I did a film called Pit Stop for Jack right after that, and that was an amazing experience. Another truly grindhouse film, guerrilla filmmaking at its finest, because it was a film about stock car races and more specifically figure eight races. Okay, and cars going through that intersection. Okay, at high speeds. And so that was pretty amazing. We shot all of the race footage ourselves, okay? And the thing is, for production, Roger Corman gave Jack Hill $35,000 to make this film. And we had like 100 cars and drivers. We had everything that we needed. And how did you get that? Well, I'll tell you. We had the use of Ascot Park, and the way that we got the use of that was we made the owner of the racetrack, Ascot Park, the announcer for the races. And we made the doctor who ran the clinic, the real clinic where they would take these drivers when they'd get busted up, we made him the doctor. See where this is going? Mm-hmm. and the bar that everybody went to right across the street from the racetrack after the races, we made the owner of the bar the bartender. And George Barris, the custom car guy, was in the film, okay, because we used his custom car shop at one point. And it was just on and on and on. And then we made a telephone call to a brewery and said, we're doing this film and there are 5 party scenes in it. And the guy says, where do you want the beer? And so we had this beer truck that was, you know, on the set, and that kept the drivers happy, and we had the use of their cars and everything. And I had the keys to the truck, okay, so it was like, excuse me, one scratch on my car and these keys get lost, okay? So, you know, that's the way we got the film done. It was amazing. And there was a young woman in the film called Ellen McRae, who we all later knew as Ellen Burstyn. That was her first film. And I did Point Blank with Lee Marvin, who was a great guy. I just, you know, loved hanging out with him. And it was funny, I went in for the interview with John Borman, and he said, he wanted to kind of get a feel of, you know, where I was and what I could bring to the role. And he said, well, if you were a sniper and you wanted to kill somebody, what would you do? And I said, well, I would probably, you know, find out his pattern and kind of follow him, and then maybe feign having car problems and have the hood up and then just take a real good shot at him from, not too far away, but I'd make sure that I dumb the shell. And he goes, "What is that?" And I said, "Well, you cut a star into the shell, and so when you do that and you hit somebody, it goes in the size of a dime and comes out the size of a cash register." And he loved that line and put it in the film. I didn't get to say it, but it wound up in the film. But I had a nice little role. It was nothing big, but it was just cool being with Lee Marvin. Yeah, got me in 3 fights in one night. I couldn't believe it. He was one of those guys, the guy that is the instigator. Yeah. Because one of the crew guys at the rap party was coming out to this girl, and she blew him off, and he got pissed off and threw a shot glass at her and missed her by 1.5 miles, but it came whizzing right past my head. And so Marvin says, "Did you see what that guy just did?" And I went, "Yeah." And he goes, "Are you going to let him get away with that?" And, okay, here we go. So, that was fight number 1, and then fight number 2 happened. I forgot how that thing started. And then this guy was making improper advances to a young lady who was just there trying to, she's a young starlet and trying to meet people and whatnot. And he was being a jerk. And so I told him to knock it off. And he basically told me to, shut up and get out of my way. And he made it advance again. So I just grabbed him and threw him against the wall and had him pinned there. And I found out later that it was Sergio Leone. And I just never seemed to be cast in a Sergio Leone film for some reason. I don't know why. I was kind of slated to fall into Lee Van Cleef's spot in that whole spaghetti western thing, because Van Cleef was taken over for Clint Eastwood, and the Italian director got nervous because he didn't have this actor that he could reach out and touch, because Van Cleef was already in Italy and living there, okay? And because he couldn't communicate with me on a daily basis or be able to sit down and talk with me, he got real nervous about it and hired somebody else. But a week later, Jack Hill called and said, "I'm going to go do a movie in the Philippines. Want to come?" And so there we go. And that started my whole Philippine movie experience.
Yeah, there's an interesting segue to that, because John Ashley had gone over in, I believe, '67 to do a film called Brides of Blood, which eventually turned into the Blood Island trilogy, Mad Dr. Blood Island, Beast of Blood. And he found out that it was really cheap to shoot out there, and he'd gotten a hold of Roger Corman, someone who he had worked for in the Beach Party movies, all those things, and said, "We can do a lot of stuff over here real cheap." And I guess that's when Jack Hill was contacted. Jack contacted you, and you guys went over there and started doing those, women in prison movies.
Yep, that was it. We went over and we did a film called The Big Dollhouse, which was Pam Grier's first film. And amazing. Jack said, we've got this girl that's so dynamic and just electrifying, and you're just going to love her. And I said, yeah, okay. And when I met her, I said, oh my God, yeah, this girl is going to be a big star, and well, guess what? Yeah, she became a big star. And we did 6 films together, all total. Yeah, we did the Big Dollhouse, The Big Birdcage, Black Mama, White Mama, Coffee, Foxy Brown, Jackie Brown, did them all. Yep. I was in the Philippines for 6 months. I did 4 films in 6 months, and I became like a native. I mean, it was just like home to me. And we were living in the Intercontinental Hotel in Makati, which is kind of the totally upscale community. And I caught on to what was going on, because I was a kid from the streets and I knew how to kind of move around, okay? And I caught on to what was going on, and so I went, I got a fistful of 5 peso notes, and everybody in the hotel with a uniform, I just started handing them money. And I never had to lift a finger for anything. I had a guy that would come into my room every day, shine all of my shoes. Okay, I never had to make out a laundry list. They would come in, do my laundry, fold it, put it in the drawers. I had fresh flowers, fresh food every day, and my own table in the coffee shop in the morning, so that I had my breakfast. My newspaper was there. As soon as I sat down and picked up the newspaper, the coffee went into the cup. It was amazing.
That was actually head and shoulders from your first digs when you were over there, which you said was basically a complete shithole.
Yeah. The first place that we stayed in was a converted insane asylum. And I thought I was going to go nuts while I was in there, because this guy took me down to my room when all of the women went up. But this room had jalousie windows, the kind that open up like so and close like that. And the bottom pane was out. And when he opened the door, a rat was carrying a kitten out the window. Okay, he just killed this little kitten and was taking him off to eat him. And I said, I don't think so. Okay, so I got put upstairs with the girls. And that still was not the best situation in the world, because we had to keep the air conditioning on all night to keep the mosquitoes from eating us alive. But we had to keep the lights on to keep the cockroaches from crawling all over the place. So it was terrible. So the girls kind of mutinied and said, either we get into a real hotel or, this is not going to work. So that's how we wound up in the Intercontinental Hotel. The Big Dollhouse was this crazy kind of women's prison picture where I played the guy who supplied the prison with produce. But at the same time, I was smuggling in mail and, whatever else for little sexual favors, And so it just turned into this wild situation, and Pam and I had a scene between the bars where we were kind of groping one another, and it was a pretty hot little scene. And so they staged a breakout, and we helped them with that, and busted them out of the prison with my produce truck, and it was nuts. It was kind of crazy. The big bird cage was kind of wild, because I was playing this character called Django, who was a revolutionary. Actually, he was just kind of lazy, but he had his band of men, and we were going to stage this prison riot and break out this woman's prison, because all of my men needed women. And so I was smart enough to figure out that, if all of these guys are getting laid, they're going to, keep in line, and I won't have any problem with these guys. So that was the plan. And all of the guards in the prison were gay, and so I had to impersonate this gay guy, okay, who was going to get a job as a guard in the prison, so I'd be the inside man. And it was funny, when we did the breakout scene, we had this moat around the prison grounds, and they were spreading rubber cement on one of the guards, because they were going to set him on fire. And then he runs and jumps into the water. And I looked over into the water, and there was a snake in the water. And I nudged the guy next to me, and I said, "Snake." And he goes, "Shut up." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because he won't jump." I said, "Okay, yeah, this is cool." And so they set the guy on fire, and he jumped in the water, and then they hollered "snake," and it was like this guy could almost walk on water. He came shooting up out of that thing, and got to the shore safely. But that was the kind of stuff that we were doing. It was all crazy. And the Filipino stuntmen, it was like a badge of honor to not wear pads and to not have airbags to fall into, and then just fall out of trees into the ground. And it's like, oh, what? And so I was supposed to shoot this guy off a tower at one point, and it was hard ground, okay? And I said, no, I can't do this. I can't, no, I won't do it. He's got to have some kind of protection, okay? Because this guy's falling 2 stories. And so, don't you guys have a net? And reluctantly, they go, yeah, I get a net, and let's have this guy land in the net. So they did. So here we go. They stretch out the net, and there's 10 guys holding onto this net, okay? Well, I know it's going to happen. The guy falls through the thing. Yeah, they broke his fall, kind of, but it turned into this 10-person headbutt because they all just kind of sucked right into the center, and it was just this pile of bodies in a net. But, you know, at least we saved the guy's life. Jack had seen pictures of this place. It was absolutely beautiful. It was in the mountains, high up in the mountains, the highest peaks in Luzon, the main island. And there was these rice paddies that were cut into the sides of the mountain, and it was just an amazing place. And so we were going to go up there and shoot. Well, the only way that made any sense to go up there, because the car ride was 17 hours, okay, was to go up by missionary plane, and they could only take 3 people at a time, okay. So they take the people up. And what he was doing, there was no runway. They had just kind of shaved the top of the mountain off. And so when he came in for a landing, he would crab the plane sideways so it would just slide like this and it'd be easier to stop so he wouldn't fall off the other side. I mean, that's how small it was. So Pam and Jack and I were the last 3 to go up. And so we're waiting for our guides, and all the jungle noises and everything are happening around us, and it was pretty cool. And we got the guides came up, and they grabbed all our bags and everything, and they started down the mountain. And I looked over, and in the bushes was this little guy. He was like 4 foot something, and wearing a loincloth and a spear. And I tapped Pam on the shoulder, and I said, Pam, check it out. And she took one look, and I think she beat everybody to the bottom of the mountain because it was pretty bizarre. And that's the way that whole shoot went. And at one point, our guide, and Jack and I were walking down this little dirt road thing, and he goes, you know, over the top of this mountain is a beautiful, pristine village, but you guys don't want to go there. Excuse me, that's an invitation right away, you know. So we said, how do we get there? And he said, well, there's the path. And I said, where? And it was erosion. And sometimes the path was this wide, and sometimes it was that wide, never any wider. And so we load up a camera and a skeleton crew, 3 or 4 guys, and we head up to the top of this mountain. And we come down the other side, and it was this beautiful, pristine, quiet little village, cone-shaped huts. And in the center, there was one large hut. There was some activity going on in there, and our guide told us that, you know, it's the season for the planting of the rice. And we knew that this was a headhunter's region, but as crazy as it sounds, it's like a seasonal thing, because when they harvest the rice, all contracts have got to be honored. And if you don't honor a contract, that's it for your head, okay? If I say I'm going to marry that guy's daughter and then I back out, I lose my head. That's it. So we knew we were there at the right time because they were just going to start planting the rice. They weren't going to start harvesting it. So he says, wait at the outside of the village here. I'm going to go in and see if it's okay for us to come in. So he motions for us to come, and I duck under the eaves of this cone-shaped hut on stilts and come face to face with the guy who was the chief of the tribe. And no cartilage in his nose, just meat kind of flopping there and one tooth hanging down. And he hands me this bowl, and I look at it, and it's blood, and it has beetle nuts floating around in it. And beetle nuts are like peyote, okay? It's a hallucinogen. And And I looked at the guide and I said, what am I supposed to do with this? And he goes, you're supposed to drink it. I said, come on, what are you talking about? He said, you better drink it, okay? And I went, Jesus. So I drink this stuff, okay? I find out later it's chicken blood. Great, that's all you need. And in back of me, Jack Hill goes, holy shit. And I turn around to see what he's looking at, and the entire eaves of his hut were lined with skulls. Okay, and I went, oh yeah, this is some serious business now. So we shot a couple of scenes that we needed, and let's get the hell out. And the thing is, the beetle nuts kicked in, and I walked 7 miles through the jungle barefoot and didn't even know it until the next day when my feet were the size of a couch. You know, I got really fucked up. Yeah.